Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome into Kurt Magoosh Sports. Here wearing, I guess, one of my favorite t-shirts, Arizona Cardinals. I wanted to spend some time today kind of just recapping my emotions about the Super Bowl and I guess like maybe the entire season. Gonna probably take like about 20 or 25 minutes. It's just going to be like my unfiltered opinions of the game that I've kind of been bottling up for a long time, I guess, or for like a day or two. Very interesting. So Matthew Stafford, the quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams, he has one of the most interesting, and controversial careers, maybe polarizing careers. Because he was in Detroit. He was in Detroit for like 11 seasons. And when he was in Detroit, he was a guy that you'd watch like on DirecTV Sunday Ticket. You'd watch him play. And you saw that he had a big arm. You saw that he could make a couple of big throws. But yet, he was never able to sustain consistency enough to make a wild card consistently in the NFC. He was never able to compete with the likes of Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. And now a lot of people can look at it and say, well, he never really had the coaching. He never really had the wide receivers. He never had the offensive line. He never had the coordinators to do it. And that it's a team game. So it's very interesting, his career. Then you look at maybe Tom Brady or you just look at like some of the other really good quarterbacks, like Phillip Rivers, right? He's a guy that we consider the narrative around Rivers is he's a really good regular season player. But when it gets to the postseason, he can't get it done. He loses to Mark Sanchez. He loses to Phillip Rivers. He loses consistently in the playoffs. But yet, a guy like Matthew Stafford, because he's never made the playoffs, he doesn't have or he's made it like 3 times, played in forgettable games. He did play great against the New Orleans Saints. The year he threw for 5,000 yards, I think he acquired a lot of yards in that game. Against the Dallas Cowboys, that is when Matthew Stafford had his moment to really seize. They were up 13-0 in that game, and he did not step on their neck, and he let Romo back in, and Romo was able to have a come-from-behind victory against Stafford. That was his only other playoff experience. So you look at Matthew Stafford and the totality of a career, and you analyze his career against like maybe a Joe Flacco. And Joe Flacco, because he really flamed out the last several years, he was known as a complimentary quarterback, as an inaccurate kind of statuesque quarterback. But the thing is about Joe Flacco is that when you look at his playoff success compared to Matthew Stafford, it is much greater. It is much greater than Matthew Stafford's. I mean, Joe Flacco, I'm going to pull up his record. Joe Flacco, during his Super Bowl run, he beat Peyton Manning in Denver, okay, in an all-time overtime game, one of the greatest games in the history of the NFL, all right, second best to maybe the Chiefs and Bills this year. That game was a classic. Then he outdueled Tom Brady in the second half. He had Ray Lewis, a really good defense, but he was doing it with like Jacoby Jones. I'm sure I'm missing a really good wide receiver that I think Anquan Bolden was on that championship team. Okay, I don't know if Ray Rice was still playing for the Ravens at that time. It might have been Willis McGahee, but like that was a really fun and good Baltimore team. And then Joe Flacco went out and he beat Big Ben Roethlisberger head to head in the postseason. He beat him heads up. Cup. And then against the Patriots, he had an all-time duel where the Patriots needed a double reverse pass to beat him. I remember that was like 2012 or 2013. But yet, Joe Flacco in the regular season was considered inconsistent, would throw a lot of incompletions. But is Joe Flacco going to be a Hall of Famer? If Matthew Stafford is going to be a Hall of Famer because of this one great season where, let's look at what Matthew Stafford did. He's playing with an all-time great. So it's kind of like a Troy Aikman-led season. He's playing with Michael Irvin. He's playing with Cooper Kupp. So I'm going to get to my honest opinion of why I'm skeptical of, Stafford's career. It's because if Matthew Stafford, if he was like an all-time great elite quarterback in Detroit, he would have found a way to uproot the franchise, kind of, to put it on his back. You look at what Deshaun Watson was able to do in Houston, and I think it's even more impressive than anything Stafford has done in Detroit, because Deshaun Watson was able to go out with a DeAndre Hopkins, and they were able to carry a really weak running game and a bad defense and a bad expansion franchise, and they were able to win games. All right, and they were able to do it on a consistent level. You look at Jake Delhomme and his ironic playoff career, but I'm going back to Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson beat the Oakland Raiders, who are a really good team. I know Derek Carr was not there for that playoffs, but Deshaun Watson was also able to go, and Deshaun Watson was able to beat Josh Allen. And he came back from a 16-0 deficit to beat Josh Allen in overtime. Clutch throw after clutch throw. Incredible playoff performance by Deshaun Watson. But because then he went up to New England and lost against the greatest ever, you just toss aside that playoffs and you just consider that like a failure of a season, the same as Matthew Stafford never making the postseason. So looking at how you kind of grade quarterbacks and their hierarchy of greatness, it's kind of like, I look at Andrew Luck in his rookie year when he had nothing in Indianapolis and he beat Kansas City and came back. And that is an incredible accomplishment. And Andrew Luck went on the road to Denver and he beat Peyton Manning in Denver en route to then losing to Tom Brady and losing to the eventual Super Bowl champions in 2015. Andrew Luck had 2 years of making the playoffs in a kind of crappy, bad Indianapolis Colts, all right? A crappy, I want to say that word, but a franchise that ever since Peyton Manning was there was complete dog manure, was horrible. You look at Peyton Manning too. Every quarterback that gets drafted number one is going to dog shit. Or I'll just say shit. All right. Every quarterback that goes number one, the Indianapolis Colts came from Baltimore. They're in Indianapolis, a small market full of crap, in terms of football, all right? They had no tradition at all. None. Zero. And what Peyton Manning was able to do is he took that team and made the Colts into a relevant and a really good franchise. He uplifted the franchise. He left the franchise in a better place than it has been. And as a quarterback, you got to lead. You got to lead your defense. You got to lead the wide receivers. You got to lead the running backs. Stafford was a good teammate. Okay, I think he cared, all right? But there are quarterbacks that have just honestly have cared and just have done better. Baker Mayfield had a rough year this year. But Baker Mayfield last year was able to win a playoff game in Cleveland. All right, he was able to do that. He was able to accomplish that. What do you look to? You look to accomplish team. You look to accomplish team success. That's how I view a quarterback. Team success and longevity of team success, which is winning regular season games and making the playoffs, is the biggest, one of the biggest successes you can have. And Matthew Stafford, every year in Detroit, maybe it's just because you never saw the personality of Stafford, but it just seemed like he was going through the motions. Like he had a big arm, but it seemed like he felt a little sorry for himself, and he just didn't like his existence in Detroit that much. I guess that's fine. And he stayed in Detroit. And God, it's almost like he was in pain living in Detroit. And people around the country, they view Detroit as football hell and just as a city that's unattractive. And I feel horrible for the city of Detroit. That's why I'm really starting to become a Detroit Lions fan, because everybody piles on the city of Detroit. And yesterday, boy, if I was a Lions fan for a really long time, and I'm kind of a newer, kind of adopted Lions fan because of Dan Campbell, because of Brad Holmes, and because of everything, I would feel sick to my stomach. Because if you have any pride in your history or your football team, Matthew Stafford, essentially, it's like a guy that grows. Here's the analogy: you're a public school teacher. You're a tutor at a public school, and you are around a student through his 10th and through his 9th and 10th grade year, and that student is a decent student, but he gets like D's, he gets C's in that school. He is not a good student in that school. Then he goes to another school with more tutors or a different tutors, different pieces around him. And then that same student that was a mediocre-like student that showed a couple of signs of life but was kind of a mediocre student that didn't accomplish anything, that student then went to a private school, completely turned around their life. And I'm not I'm saying like Stafford. I'm not saying he was like the awful of awful players. I'm not saying it was Seneca Wallace on Detroit. But it's like then he goes to another school system, and then he becomes then he literally comes and, is able to change his grades to get into a really good college, and then he goes to Harvard and somehow transfers to Harvard, somehow gets a perfect score on his ACTs, somehow is perfect. And that's the frustrating thing, is like in my mind, right, I'm having trouble, I guess, in my own mind, looking at Matthew Stafford as a winning quarterback. That is something that is fundamentally wrong with how I maybe view Stafford and how I view sports. Is I put players in boxes. I try to organize players. Like I look at Phillip Rivers, like he wasn't able to win in the playoffs. He is a playoff, he cannot get it done. He doesn't win in the playoffs. So I think every sports fan puts players in boxes. They either like or don't like players. They have narratives about players. Some look at Kirk Cousins and think, that he's not a winner. But some look at him and what he did for Washington, for the Washington football team, and with the Redskins and the Commanders, I guess. But at that time, it was the Redskins. And they look at him and they view him and they say to him, like in Washington, where he was on a bad franchise, he still won a division championship for that Washington Redskins. And then he went up to Minnesota, and he still outdueled Drew Brees in the Dome and had a game-winning touchdown pass to Kyle Rudolph. But then he went to the 49ers, and he was not the better team. He was not the better team in that game. But yet he's going to get criticized for losing that game. He's going to get criticized for losing that game. Against the Bears, that was a bad game. But, Kirk Cousins, if he stays in Minnesota, which is an average team, he's going to get criticized, all right? And some of it is reasonably fine, you're right, because some of it he doesn't get it done, and he throws too many picks, and on the biggest stages, he's not that good. But yet Kirk Cousins, it's like if Kirk Cousins goes to the 49ers or he goes to a juggernaut team, like maybe the Packers, and then he's able to win a Super Bowl with like a great wide receiver core, suddenly do all those years in Minnesota, do then you say, oh, in Minnesota, like they wasted his talent because he went somewhere else and won? It's kind of like the same thing with Detroit. So I think Detroit's getting it too hard right now. I think some of the blame has to go to Matthew Stafford, and he got better in L.A. Some of the credit needs to be for Sean McVay for making Matthew Stafford better than what he has been. I mean, Stafford's always been all right. It's more than Stafford, like Was he a problem in Detroit? Was he really good in Detroit? Because, the 5,000-yard year, he was really good. This year on the Rams, the team was great, and he's like a complimentary piece, but yet you're not going to compare Matthew Stafford, and you're not going to say he's Brad Johnson. You're not going to say he's Trent Dilfer. It's almost like if Matt Ryan would have won a Super Bowl, we would have gotten to this point better of quarterbacks that are considered chokers, overcoming that label and finishing a job, finishing a task. But because Matt Ryan lost, it just was so seamless. The Super Bowl champions are either Tom Brady or either the Mannings, Then you look at Eli Manning, totally different than Stafford, I guess. Stafford has more talent, can throw it further, whatever. But Eli Manning, he's clutch. He gets it done in the playoffs. So this whole Hall of Fame argument for Matthew Stafford is going to be fascinating. I don't think that there's been any quarterback that has played 13 seasons and has never won a playoff game. Because at least Deshaun Watson's won. He put his heart on the line for the city of Houston. All right, and for that franchise. And did Matthew Stafford do that? Yes, I'd say earlier in his career. But with Matt Patricia, then he just kind of quit. And then everybody in society or everybody in the public said, you know what, it's fine, He put in his time in hell in Detroit. And yeah, even though he kind of quit on Matt Patricia, it's all Matt Patricia's fault. Well, sometimes you're the quarterback and you want to see the quarterback be elite. You want to see him rise and take a really bad franchise and get it better. And if you don't get it done, you don't get it done. But everybody seems to always blame management. They always seem to blame the coaching, the players around you. They never blame the actual player for performance. They never do. They never blame performance. And then when Jimmy Garoppolo wins, they then credit management. It's like a whole narrative formation based on, if you watch all these shows and these narratives and things, it's like some players like Matthew Stafford can go 13 years and get a free pass for never winning games. But Donovan McNabb every year is making the playoffs and every year is playing high-pressure football, but yet he gets punished for playing on the Eagles, which was a shitty franchise at the time. Really bad. And you look at who McNabb was playing with. He was playing with Todd Pinkston. He was playing with James Thrash, Brian Curtis. He was playing with crap. L.J. Smith. He wasn't playing with good players. And Donovan McNabb was able to get the Eagles to Super Bowls and NFC championships. But because he wasn't able to win a Super Bowl, we look at Donovan McNabb and we say, yeah, he's not a Hall of Famer, but he's all right as a quarterback. But now because Matthew Stafford won a championship, we're viewing Matthew Stafford's career as better than Donovan McNabb's career. Where Donovan McNabb, every single year for about 5 years, was consistently getting beaten up, and he consistently was getting the NFC championship. Consistently playing great in the regular season. And winning. But yet we look at Matthew Stafford. He gets a 4th seed in the playoffs. He owes 2 divisional games in the damn playoffs, against the Kyler Murray, who already wants out, one of the crappiest teams, organizations, whatever, in football. And then the Niners. That was a big win. The defense, the way they played against Tampa Bay, Stafford didn't need to do much. Tom Brady played the worst playoff game you could argue of his career because of that defense. Joe Burrow played bad because of that defense. Kyler Murray played awful. You could say Stafford's biggest win was San Francisco. That was the most impressive win, the way he played in that 4th quarter. Yeah, the guy dropped the interception, but the drives he had in the 4th quarter were big-time drives, big-time moments, big-time plays. Maybe it's because it's SoFi Stadium. It's a stadium that is new and has no character. If he went out to Lambeau and, won that game, I view just football in the cold. I view football in Packerland, what Jimmy Garoppolo was able to do. With for some reason, I'm biased towards Jimmy Garoppolo. That is probably a problem with me. It's I think going to Dallas and winning against that franchise is somehow epic. And that first playoff game between the Rams and Cardinals, to me, those two teams are just so new. It didn't have that feel, that epic, incredible feel. And then, Stafford against the Bucs, a newer team with Brady. That game, for the most part, Stafford, I got to give him credit, though. He did play a wonderful first half of football. He did. But then in the end, the way he went to the finish line, he limped his way to that finish line. Against the 49ers in that whole game, he was not that good. He was not that good. He did turn up when it mattered, though. He did turn up when it mattered. Against the Bucs in the second half, he was not that good. Not that good. The Cardinals was his best game. And then yesterday, was weird, right? Because the Stafford defenders have a great point, right? Because Odell Beckham gets hurt. Kendall Blanton is already hurt. Kendall Blanton. So you're down Higbee. You're down Odell. You're down Kendall Blanton. You're down to your third string tight end. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Can't really get over it, I mean, he had, Matthew Stafford had a good Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford, a narrative in my brain is that Detroit's not that good, but neither is Matthew Stafford because Matthew Stafford couldn't win there. But now I'm the jerk because the whole time, was I wrong the entire time? Because during the regular season in November, by the way, Matthew Stafford lost every game in November and was throwing interceptions. And I'm like, aha, that's the guy. That's the guy. That's the guy that I know. That's the guy who couldn't win any games, couldn't win any playoffs because he was a little inconsistent during this 25-game regular season that we have in the NFL. And then Matthew Stafford. They get Beckham, and Matthew Stafford comes alive and has an unbelievable finish to the season. But against Tyler Huntley, he almost lost that game, but he clutched out and beat a bad Ravens team, but he still clutched out. The guy did it. He clutched out. He made those throws. I mean, when you looked at Rams-Ravens, this wasn't a Rams season where cover to cover they were the squad. Every year, because the season is so long, it's so convoluted in terms of what we got in the championship and everything. Because with 16 games, with 17 games, there's too many games, so no one's going to be able to have a dominant cover-to-cover season anymore because adding the extra week, it's exhausting. I'm so done. I'm so done. You know what? Like next year, I should just skip weeks of the season next year because I'm so done because it is so hard to track. Like the 17 games, how could you even track who's good in the NFL? Like the Cincinnati Bengals, they lost to the New York Jets, all right? They lost to the Jets. The Bengals lost to the Browns, where Baker Mayfield went and looked like the better player than Joe Burrow after Odell Beckham left. The Browns beat the Bengals really bad. I mean, the Bengals looked good against the Ravens both times, but, Cincinnati against Chicago, I think that they lost. I think Andy Dalton, I think that Joe Burrow this year, you can't even remember. Let's go back and look at Cincinnati. Let's go back and look at their regular season championship. Let's go back and look at their regular season. Because you got two teams in the Rams and the Bengals. The Rams, they were the most talented team, but they really paced themselves throughout the regular season. And I'm not even talking about the game last night. I'm talking more about the journey of these two teams. And now I'm going to shift gears from talking about that guy, Matthew Stafford. And it does suck It does suck for the Detroit Lions fans. It sucks because, again, your guy, it's like you're a crappy golf. It's like you're a golf teacher, and your golfer it can hit it a long way, but you're a golf teacher, and your guy gets in tournaments and he misses cuts every single week. Doesn't do shit. Then your quarterback goes to another tutor or teacher, and he does shit. And he has technology, and he then turns into a champion. So the entire time you're saying, you know what? My teaching can be better, but this golfer doesn't have that clutch gene. He doesn't have it. There isn't an alpha in that guy. But he goes to another guy, and then he's a freaking champion. It's like, what? It's like Sergio Garcia winning the Masters. What? But it's also like, it's not even like Stafford has even gotten the ability to choke. It's like he's not even there. He's not even participating in the postseason tournament. It's a little like Eli Manning too, like Eli Manning and the Giants. There's a lot of parallels, but put it this way. I'm more to the point where I want to actually see a part of me like either with Matthew Stafford, either he resorts back to kind of being average, and then that'll make it even more weird. This 1 year will then even break my brain even more. But then if Matthew Stafford in a couple of years, if he's constantly in Super Bowls and constantly winning, then it's going to be like, you know what? This guy, he's freaking elite. He's great. Because right now I'm confused. I'm in a stage of confusion with Matthew Stafford. I don't know what to think. Is it this LA guy that's playing with these goofy yellow jerseys in this soccer, in this market that in this goofy sports city and market with the LA Rams, just like their fans, like there's good Rams fans there. But if you're a Lions fan, if you're a Colts fan, and you live in like a cold weather city where football is literally your town and your life, like Buffalo, you must be like, gosh damn it. This city gets everything. They get the Dodgers, the Lakers, and now they have a coach like Sean McVay that just gets there and wins. Amazing. So this is a whole rant about yesterday. All right. So Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Bengals, right? Let's talk about their journey this year. Really an interesting journey. And this is 17 games. So you're going to see games here where it's going to break your brain, where you're not going to understand it. I guess kind of almost like those Giants teams, that got hot. And I'm a hypocrite because I love those teams. Played against Minnesota. Joe Burrow played great in that game. He came back. They won in overtime of that game. Kirk Cousins was clutch in that game, tied that game up at the end of regulation. But yet Kirk Cousins isn't clutch, I forgot. Then they went and they shat the bed against the Bears. I was right. Joe Burrow played horrifically. He threw three interceptions and 2 pick sixes in that game. He sucked. The winning quarterback that day was Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. They combined for 110 yards. Joe Burrow was bad. Then they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Burrow in that game, exceptionally good. 14 for 18, 170 yards, and 3 touchdowns. See how I added that 3 touchdown pass? Because he'd had 170 yards. It's like he threw 1 touchdown, 1 pick. But those touchdowns, like on the goal line when you throw them, oh my God, did they make your stat line look great. Then against Jacksonville, we all remember that Thursday night. That was Urban Meyer's trip down to Ohio, where he ended up essentially sitting in a chair at a place that serves alcohol. And he ended up having a female that was 25 years younger than him happen to sit on his lap as he did not fly back from his team. And that created a storm and a buzz that radiated through the National Football League. But in that game, Joe Burrow in this game, he really cut his teeth in this game. Because you'd say the Jags suck. It's on Thursday Night Football. It's on a streaming network where you can't even get it on your television. You have to order it through Amazon Prime. But anyway, Joe Burrow in that game, what he ended up doing in that game was Joe Burrow in the second half was unbelievable. I mean, they scored 24 points in the second half. They were down 14-0 at the half. He played a bad first half. Lawrence played an incredible first half, but Lawrence couldn't get it done in that game. Lawrence choked it away. The refs, the Jaguars defense, that was a massive choke, but it's also because Joe Burrow was sensational. This was his best game of the season to me. He threw for 348 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyler Boyd had 9 catches, 118 yards in this game. C.J. Uzomah was amazing. That game was a classic, and they kicked the game winner with Evan McPherson, but that final drive might have been a 4-minute final drive where Joe Burrow sucked the life out of the Jacksonville Jaguars vampire style. So that was tremendous. All right? Credit to Joe Burrow in that instance. Green Bay Packers. Joe Burrow, again, that was the missed field goal game, where Mason Crosby and Evan McPherson, it's crazy that I can't even remember Evan McPherson was even playing that game because he wasn't good. But Joe Burrow, again, played pretty well in that game, and the Bengals played pretty well against a really good team. Then they went to the Lions. They took care of business. Then they played Baltimore, and that was Joe Burrow. That was Jamar Chase. That was a sensational game. Jamar Chase in this game, by the way, he had 201 yards, and Joe Burrow threw for 416 yards. That's like, are you freaking kidding me, man? Against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, you're an underdog, and you win by over 30. That's what Joe Burrow said, too. He's like, I knew our team was going to be better than last year, but when we beat the Ravens like that, it's like, whoa. Then they went to the Jets, and that was Mike White. That's when their defense played like complete shit. And Mike White took advantage. And now it's the Mike White epic game. Mike White in that performance. Mike White, 400 yards on this Bengals defense. The same defense that shut down Patrick Mahomes. As we go through this, it's a good exercise just to kind of try to wrap your brain around some of the absurdities of the sport of football and of sports in general, is that Mike White against this same defense threw for 410 yards against Lou Rigmu's defense. But Patrick Mahomes in the second half, the best quarterback in the NFL with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and Andy Reid, they combined and scored no points in the second half. So that just shows you how you improve, or maybe Joe Burrow put his magic dust, and maybe Zach Taylor. Because, again, Joe Burrow, maybe it's just magic, but that's why the Bengals were magic, because they allowed 400 yards to Mike White. They were in a really good defense during the regular season, but against Patrick Mahomes and against Matthew Stafford and against Henry and Tannehill, they turned into this incredible world beater of a defense. Against Mahomes and against Stafford, I know he didn't have Beckham in the second half because of a tragic knee injury that you never want to see, and I feel awful for Odell Beckham. I'm glad he at least gets to get a championship because of that injury, but man. Then the Browns beat the dog piss out of Cincinnati. Let's see how many yards Baker threw against this vaunted Super Bowl team that should have won the Super Bowl. A team that was winning the Super Bowl with 2 minutes left allowed Mike White to throw for 400 yards. And then, you know how many yards Baker Mayfield threw? This was a rout. 41-16. This game wasn't close. Baker Mayfield, the shittiest quarterback, right? A quarterback who sucks, who we're so happy that Odell Beckham got away from. Against these champions, well, he only did throw for 218 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nick Chubb, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns. Joe Burrow in this game, 282 yards. Okay. 28 of 40, no touchdowns, 2 turnovers, 2 interceptions. Then they had a bye week, so then they regrouped. They went out to Vegas. They took care of business, 32-13. Joe Burrow in that game, 150 yards passing and a touchdown in that game. All right, Joe, I see you. Throwing it for a couple of yards there. Then against the Chargers, how many picks did Joe Burrow throw in this one? He threw 2 interceptions, 300 yards. Justin Herbert, 317, 3 touchdowns. Who's better, Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow? Everybody's saying at this point, It's Herbert. I mean, both teams are the same record, and guess who's got that tie break? Chargers do. Then Joe Burrow, clutch, has a good game against the Niners, but guess who's clutcher? It's Garoppolo. Because Garoppolo threw for 296, outdueled Joe Burrow down the stretch, had an incredible, legendary comeback drive to win this game. You're watching this, you're thinking, Jimmy G, he's coming. But Joe Burrow in this game, he hit Jamar Chase, came alive late. The Niners were winning cover to cover, but the Cincinnati Bengals scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. So, wow. All right. Then the Bengals play against the Broncos. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt. This game is just dog crap all around. Fired coaches. So, again, they played the Raiders, who fired their coach. They won that game. They played Pittsburgh with a quarterback who's no longer there. They played backup quarterbacks and Tyler Huntley. They had the COVID game. Just a hodgepodge of a mess of a season that this is like the team that we're talking about. 15-10 against the Broncos. 15-10. They win. Joe Burrow. Oh, he has that it factor, doesn't he? Huh, Joe Burrow? Yeah, he probably threw in this game 157 yards. Again, that it factor, man. He's just elite. He wears all these cool clothes. He only threw for 157 yards against a Denver defense. Boy. But guess what? You got to give credit to Cincy's defense in that game. Then against the Ravens, against a COVID-led roster, this is where Joe Burrow shows up. 500 yards. What? A guy throws for 150 yards. A guy throws against the Bears for like 120 yards and 3 interceptions. It's like, what the heck is going on, man? We're ping-ponging around with Joe Burrow against the Chargers. He didn't have a good game. We're ping-ponging around with a young quarterback. But then against the Chiefs, then it's like Joe Burrow of past is gone. You know, against the Chiefs, the duel. Joe Burrow, 446 yards, 4 touchdowns, outduels Mahomes. So then you're like, I give up trying to understand this. Or then the guys finally arrived. Then he gets to the playoffs against the Raiders. He's consistent. He has a great game. 244 yards, no turnovers. Against the Titans, he has that one tipped pass turnover, but he throws for 350 yards, so he was tremendous. And then against the Chiefs, he probably threw for 270, I'm going to say. 250. And then last night, how many yards did he throw for last night? This final statistics, he threw the ball 33 times for 263 yards, no turnovers and a touchdown. Looks better statistically, but if you watch the game, he had every chance to win that game. So the Bengals, they got hot. You know, they got to play Tannehill. They played a coach who got fired. The Bills had a tougher road. They had to go against Belichick and Mac Jones. And then, because I think the Patriots are better than the Raiders. And then the Bills then had to go to the Chiefs, where it was a duel of all duels. And then the Chiefs were tired. They had to beat a Steeler team with a tough defense, and then they, because of the bye rules, they weren't able to have the rest needed in order for them to beat Cincinnati. They ran out of gas, and it was too emotional for them because of that Bills game. They slowed down, so then the NFL really screwed the Chiefs, so then Cincinnati got to take their place, and what you saw yesterday was a lukewarm punt-a-thon in the second half where both offenses were terrible. The defense and the running game was fine, but both quarterbacks played really poor the entire game. But yeah, we're going to give credit to Matthew Stafford for winning this championship. But really, with the 17 games, I mean, how could you even view Super Bowls in the same way? And then now that's me being a hater. That's me not being incoherent. So, some of this rant is incoherent. Some of it might have bits of truth. A lot of it's going to be incoherent. But I think it's entertaining. I'm enjoying the content that, I'm deciphering, because I'm getting it out. We're getting it out. We're going through it. We're trying to make sense. We're trying to make sense and put the pieces together of how we got Cincinnati and the Rams in there, when really it could have been like Packers Chiefs would have, been, Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, but instead we got Burrow versus Matthew Stafford. a true outlier of a year, true outlier of the season, as I'm going to need to charge the laptop pretty soon. But last night's game, Joe Burrow didn't get it done. Odell Beckham got hurt. Joe Burrow had time after time to put the game out of reach. He got that interception. They converted on fourth down. They didn't do anything with it. Crappy sack on third down. Tyler Boyd drops that other pass. Joe Burrow gets sacked. So many empty possessions by Joe Burrow. It was empty calories. Empty calories. Just like a McDonald's trip. That was last night. Rams and Bears. Rams win that game. Colts and Rams. Stafford balling. Beats the Bucs. They lose to the Cardinals. But then Stafford beats the Seahawks, beats the Giants, beats the Lions, the Texans. Then the Titans beat the Rams. Then the Niners smack the Rams. Then the Packers in Lambeau. Matthew Stafford. Boy, he still had a pretty good game. 300 yards, so pretty good game. Then he beats the Jags. Okay. They beat the Cardinals. They beat the Seahawks. They beat the Vikings. So this team is more just consistent than the Bengals are. Beat the Ravens, look really bad. They look bad in that game. And against the Vikings, Stafford didn't play well. He threw 3 interceptions and 200 yards. That was a classic Detroit Staffering. That could have been the game that derailed the season. But instead, Kirk Cousins, who's kind of in the same light, he can't put up any points. Throws for 315 yards. Can't win the game. They lose the turnover. It's like, why does this make any sense? Overtime game, Matthew Stafford throws 2 interceptions and 238 yards. So then we get to the playoffs. Stafford against the Cardinals, his best game. 13 for 17. Perfection. 200 yards on 17 throws and 2 touchdowns. That's efficiency, baby. I don't care about if you don't throw for 300 yards. That's efficient game. Against the Bucs, let's look at Stafford. He went 26 for 38 for 366 yards, so can't hate on that. That's efficient play in the playoffs. But then against the Niners, a really good defense. Matthew Stafford throws it 45 times. You're throwing it 45 times. You better get a lot of yards. Got 337 yards. He completed 30 of 45. So he played pretty good. He played all right. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. But a lot of yards. Came through in the end, like I said. All right. The defense of the Rams in the Super Bowl run against the Bengals, you know how many yards, you know how many points they gave up in the first half? They gave up 10 points. Against the Niners, I bet they only gave up 7 points. No, they gave up 10. Against the Bucs, you know how many points they gave up in the first half? 3. Against the Cardinals, you know how many points they gave up in the first half? 0. So in the first half of these games, the defense of L.A., the Cardinals scored 11 points, all in garbage time. The Buccaneers in the first half were, what did they score, 3 points in the first half? That's pretty amazing. In the first 2 playoff games, the defense of the Rams shut their opponents down. In 4 quarters of play, they held Kyler Murray and Tom Brady, held them to 3 points. All right, that's before Cam Akers started forgetting that he was actually playing a sport. Then, against the Niners, they gave up 7 points. So in the 3, guys, this is amazing. In the 3 playoff games of the Rams in the playoffs, this Rams defense gave up 7 in the last game plus 3. They gave up 10 points in 6 quarters of play. That is unbelievable. The Rams, too, for a 4th seed, probably this is the first time it's ever happened. I know a home Super Bowl, but when have we ever seen a 4th seed get 2 home playoff games? That's very rare. And 2 home playoff games against teams in their own division. Pretty amazing. Pretty convenient. convenient, I'd say the least. And then the Rams, of course, play kind of a flawed Cincy team, and they're able to get to Joe Burrow. Like we said, the game shouldn't have been close. If Beckham was in this game, the game wouldn't have been close because Beckham was going nuts. Beckham was showing out. He showed out, Odell Beckham. He did. In the biggest moment, in the biggest game, the guy was clutch. He put on a show, Stafford and McVay. And it could have even been more of a rout because, again, Joe Burrow was just overmatched last night. That's the point of the game, is that Stafford had nobody and didn't really do anything the entire game and played bad offensive football. And Joe Burrow played even worse offensive football. And that's kind of where we are with this crazy season. The 17 games, the instant gratification Rams, because they didn't build it. They didn't really build it the right way. They did not build it through the draft. Teams like the Bills who build through the draft, teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, I guess that they're, a little free agency, but they're kind of homegrown, right? The Packers are a homegrown team, build through the draft. The Cowboys are a build it through the draft kind of a team. The 49ers are totally built through the draft. The Rams went out, and they're a free agent super team of one we've never seen, like an NBA-style team. And credit to them. They get Odell Beckham, they get Von Miller, and everybody who said that the trades wouldn't matter for the stars, they're wrong. Eventually, talent wins out. As much as you want the little guy like Cincinnati to win, the talent wins out. The talent wins out. That is the point of today's podcast. Talent wins out. That's the point of the Rams, too. Get talent. Chemistry does not matter. Drafting, being patient, all those qualities do not matter. That's why it's sad, because I love the intangibles of chemistry. I love following a story and a script. Like, you look at Buffalo, they draft Josh Allen. They go through their growing pains. They lose in Houston in the playoffs. Then last year, they break through and have their season. They go to Kansas City and lose in the AFC Championship. And then this year, it's another year. They're a little inconsistent, but they get it right, and they're ready to roll, and they're hitting all cylinders again in this 17-game season, and then they can't get it done. So it's a fascinating kind of a league. I think that the point is, for this league going forward, you're going to see quarterbacks like Kyler Murray that are good quarterbacks. You're going to see them like Lamar Jackson. You're going to see quarterbacks leaving to go to different places. You're going to see tons of quarterback mobility. So then you're going to see teams with quarterbacks that, unlike the old days where the quarterbacks would stay, Stafford has set a trend here of quarterbacks leaving their franchise. And even though Stafford has paid his dues more than the people that you're going to see do this, you're going to see a ripple effect, because it does work for winning championships. The NBA model does work. And as a fan, you want to see, and again, we're fans, so the players are the most important thing, in their happiness and how much money that they make. We're not important in this, but you want to see probably loyalty and paid dues and chemistry and building on years and years of development. Kind of like you want to see how Michael Strahan and Ray Lewis won their rings, with one team battle through the ups and downs and stay on their franchise. You want to see them go through the battles and tribulations and get their jersey hung in the rafters of the franchise. That's what you want. When you want to see familiarity when you watch your team play. When you watch the game, you want there to be a level of familiarity. But I'm sure that with the Rams winning a Super Bowl, it's going to create a precedent that is a threat to familiarity with fans and watching their team. So, alrighty, guys, that is that. That is everything. And that is my unadulterated thoughts on the Rams winning the Super Bowl.